Okay, Helena, I think we could get started with the interpretation instructions, if you
Okay,
would, please.
perfect. Yes, definitely. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this workshop. So before we get started, I'm going to go over some housekeeping rules, and the interpretation instructions will be given by one of our interpreters, Marco. So first and foremost, please keep yourself muted during all presentations and when you're not speaking. We're also asking attendees to turn off your videos unless you are a panelist, as we'll have panelist discussions and we want to be able to see our speakers on the screen. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so in the chat. You can also raise your hand with the reactions button. If you're joining by phone, you can raise and lower your hand by dialing *9, then mute and unmute yourself by dialing *6. So that's *9 to raise and lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. You can also include, I already went over that. So we also have live Spanish interpretation available for Spanish speakers, and you can join the Spanish line by selecting the interpretation button with the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom window and click Spanish. And this is only available on your desktop and not by phone, unfortunately. To all panelists and participants, please be sure to speak clearly and steadily for our interpreters to understand and be able to interpret live. And last but not least, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that the recording will be shared publicly online. And that is it. I will now pass it to Marco to provide the instructions in Spanish on the main line. Go ahead, Marco.
Thank you, Elena. Muy buenos días a todos que nos acompañan. Aquellos que deseen escuchar el programa en español tendrán la opción, tenemos interpretación al vivo. Para poder acceder al canal, por favor, busque el icono con un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice Interpretation. Luego seleccione su idioma, Spanish, y de ahí podrá escuchar todo el programa enteramente en español. And for those who are listening in English, we just want to let you know if there is any comments or questions given in Spanish, you can likewise do the same. Please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, then select your language English. You will then be able to hear a live rendering of any comment from Spanish into English. Thank you. Back to you.
Alrighty, Cynthia, go ahead.
Morning, everyone. Yes, I was. I just wanted to make sure everybody got switched over. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to turn off my video so that my computer won't crash. My name is Cynthia Babich, and I'm the director of the Del Amo Action Committee, a grassroots community group that's been working in the unincorporated Los Angeles County area for over 28 years. I'm also the coordinator, along with Robina Sewell, for the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network, which was formed by frontline environmental justice communities and advocates over 17 years ago. We have all been meeting monthly since then to mentor and help each other with issues in common, as well as ones specific to the communities we serve. We have worked together on toxic tours, ground truthing projects, groundwater convenings, rulemakings at several different agencies, policy and legislative issues, as well as these environmental justice enforcement symposiums. This one is our 8th. Over time, our group have been joined by the efforts by many partners from state, local, and federal agencies, regulators, academics, and many others. We seek participation from individuals who are acting change agents for environmental justice in the circle they work in. The past 11 years, we have focused on problem solving around many of the issues we have been working on for decades by applying boots to the ground knowledge to agency policy goals. We hope these efforts will help attain environmental clarity, which we believe will lead us to equity justice for our communities. We have found that to build a common ground, it is critical to create safe spaces like our symposiums. as we work to explore and understand different perspectives and approaches to protecting our environmental justice communities and really the health of all Angelenos. We are called to a collective sense of action and our deep-rooted desire to do what is needed to save our environmentally impacted communities, which most often are hanging by a thread. We have a team of community and agency representatives within the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network that plan our symposiums. This year's team is comprised of Rubina Sewell from California Safe Schools, Stephanie Lewis, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, Jessica Brown and Rosa Borelli of the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, Todd Sachs and his enforcement team, and Deldy Reyes of the California Air Resources Board, Katie Butler, the Senior Health Deputy, Office of Supervisor Janice Hahn, Joe Liu, Coalition for Clean Air, myself and Florence Garibian and Sarah Garibian of the Del Amo Action Committee, Jennifer Malone of the Los Angeles County General Counsel's Office, and Rachel Zellweger from the California Environmental Protection Agency, as well as Susanna Ludigas with the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. Creating the space to hear each other will allow us to continue to develop solutions and collaborations. This is that kind of space. We believe this will lead to real and measurable change in the policies of agencies charged with the protection of our most vulnerable communities. Who is in the room with us today? Over 110 have registered, representing 23 environmental justice and community advocacy groups, 4 universities and unions, 4 consultants and foundations, 4 enforcement agencies and prosecutors, 3 water protectors, 2 regulation agencies, 9 state and federal agencies, 1 Los Angeles County Department, 1 City of Los Angeles Department, and 3 local, state, and federal representatives. Everybody that registered had the option to answer a question on why they would be attending, and a majority of them are here to learn and teach, as well as listen and speak. The continued support of our sponsors provide the resources to allow community voices to take a lead role in our series of virtual discussions around the nexus of environmental justice and enforcement. We would like to thank them. Community Environmental Services, California Air Resources Board, Earth Justice, City of Los Angeles Attorney, California Environmental Protection Agency, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors Sheila Kuehl, Janice Hahn, Holly Mitchell, and Hilda Solis, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and Cal Recycle. The Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network is proud of this space we have created, allowing us to come together and hear important stories from amazing leaders in the struggle to protect their communities. This is about community enforcement and how we can partner with others for better protections. It is now my pleasure to introduce Joe Liu, the Coalition for Clean Air. Joe believes everyone has the right to breathe clean air. He serves as president and CEO of the Coalition for Clean Air, a statewide organization dedicated to protecting public health, improving air quality, and preventing climate change. Dr. Liu has spent more than 30 years helping community groups and concerned individuals with environmental protection issues, including air and water pollution, the cleanup of contaminated sites, and environmental justice. Dr. Liu serves as the Speaker of the Assembly appointee to the California Transportation Commission, an independent public agency that programs and allocates more than $5 billion annually for the construction and maintenance of highway, passenger rail, transit, and active transportation projects throughout California. From 2007 to 2019, Dr. Liu served as the Governor of California appointee to the South Coast Air Quality Management District Governing Board, the public agency responsible for improving air quality for more than 17 million people living in Southern California. He's also a very dear and great friend of mine, and I would turn it over to you now, Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the kind words. I think everyone's bio is going to be kind of posted in the chat as we make our way through this. We have a really wonderful opportunity today, and I thank all of you for joining us. We are going to hear stories from community members and others who have been involved in taking on some of the most important environmental justice struggles that our area has ever seen or witnessed. And we're going to do so and kind of focus on the relationship to enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. I think you can expect to learn a lot, to have an opportunity to engage with these heroic advocates who have protected their community and hear their personal stories of what they did and how they got to doing what they did, and where enforcement and the relationship with enforcement agencies and prosecutors came into play in their personal stories. And I think you can't overstate how valuable those stories are and those experiences are. We will talk about Del Amo Action Committee, but the heroic actions of Cynthia Babich over the last, I don't know how many years, Cynthia, it's been way too many years, far more than 20 probably, but in protecting her community, that was sort of the centerpiece, and we'll hear about this from Florence, of just not only environmental neglect, but outright racist policies that targeted a community over decades and still result in this absurd proposal to force community members to live on top of and being exposed to contaminated land and vapors and groundwater for hundreds and hundreds of years, which is just completely unacceptable. But that's a story we're going to get to. We're going to, make sure that everyone understands the struggles that people go through, but also appreciates the amount that people can accomplish just by making an effort and working with enforcement agencies and prosecutors to make sure that our laws are followed and their communities are protected. Each of the speakers will be kind of asked to talk about how, when, and why they got involved and what happened once they did, and then talk about the enforcement aspects of it. We've got 6 amazing people joining us today, and we're going to take a break at about 55 minutes for a 10-minute break, to take care of things and then come back, because then we're going to we'll hear 3 speakers and then we'll hear from 3 more, including what's happened in Cudahy and Southeast Los Angeles and what's happened in the Central Valley with the Valley Improvement Project, and then Caroline Orijas, who's going to provide some perspective on how this all fits together. And we'll take another break after that and then get into our questions and answers and conversations before we wrap up. So we're in for the long haul today. I appreciate your commitment and patience for doing this, but I think it's going to be extremely rewarding. And I think we can go right into hearing from Michael Henry Hayden, if he is available. And his bio will be posted, I think, in the chat, right? You have Laura Palencia.
Yes, it will.
Okay,
He is
wonderful.
available.
So Michael's with Lincoln Heights and in Lincoln Heights, and has dealt with some school issues, Lincoln Heights Community Coalition. And Michael, please tell us about your experiences and your story.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I don't have a slideshow, but hopefully my story will be enough. And let me just describe what we're working on. So in early 2020, my neighbors and I learned of a 468 unit mixed use project that's mostly luxury apartments that was proposed on our block at 141 West Avenue 34 in Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles. We were surprised that there would be this huge housing project planned for that block based on an adjacent former dry cleaner that's been under remediation for about 35 years and a history of children being sickened at Hillside Elementary across the street. Neighbors have called this block the sick land for decades and blame this block for illnesses at the school. There's also 5 schools within half a mile. There's housing surrounding the property already. But the block where the development was proposed has had a history of industrial uses. Lincoln Heights has one of the lowest median income levels in the city, some of the lowest education levels, and also some of the highest pollution. It's a majority Latino and Asian neighborhood. About 50% of the population are first-generation immigrants. And I think that the negligent environmental review for this project is a disturbing picture of the way that marginalized communities in Los Angeles are put in harm's way. So my neighbors and I, being concerned about this new development, examined the developer's environmental review, noticed serious flaws, which led us to file an appeal with the City Planning Commission. A phase 1 review for the property misstated the groundwater direction, which led them to conclude that the dry cleaning site was not impacting the developer's site at Avenue 34. We knew that couldn't be true. The developers lied to the public, saying on their website and at meetings that they had tested the site to prove it was clean, but they didn't share any test results. So we filed our appeal. And at the appeal hearing, the developers hired actors to pretend to be Lincoln Heights residents in favor of the project. City Planning defended the project, saying that the CEQA review found no likelihood of contamination, but they ignored their own. We just recently found a city planning index of likely contaminated properties that specifically names this property, 141 West Avenue 34, is likely contaminated, and City Planning had previously recommended further testing, which never happened. However, hundreds of neighbors came out to that hearing. It was really inspiring. They spoke passionately against the project. We'd gotten the word out through door-to-door canvassing and flyers and social media. And it was really incredibly inspiring to see a community advocating for its own protection. 2 of the commissioners at that hearing even voted with us, saying that they could no longer support the city's racist planning policies and saying that if you want to see how not to do equity, this project is it. The City Planning Commission ultimately ruled that the developers and city planning needed to abide by a clause in the LA Municipal Code requiring the Department of Toxic Substance Control to review the project before the city planning could approve any clearances. The developers tried to satisfy that requirement with a simple 1-page letter from DTSC based on no empirical evidence that the site was safe to build on. And after months of effort, we compelled DTSC to clarify that the city shouldn't interpret that letter as having satisfied the city's requirements, and instead that they needed to test the property. The testing they did just last year proved the presence of dozens of toxic chemicals at dangerous levels in the soil, soil vapor, groundwater, PCE, TCE, vinyl chloride, lead, hexavalent chromium, mercury, like more than a dozen toxins. PCE concentrations were found as high as 40,000 times higher than residential screening levels. The developers responded with a cleanup plan that only brings the property to, it's calculating the vapor intrusion for their cleanup using federal guidelines for industrial projects and not for federal residential safety standards. When you talk about vapor attenuation considerations. And so that's been one of the points that we've been pushing back against. And also that there wasn't enough testing done on the site or off the site. We have asserted since they first released the test results that the proximity of the concentrations to the border of the property almost certainly mean that the contamination extends beyond the property. But DTSC refused to require any such testing, despite dozens of letters from community members, scientific experts, and our elected representatives. Now, a few weeks after they submitted their cleanup proposal, and before they approved the cleanup proposal, this is DTSC, we learned that the site used to be an illegal toxic waste dump. The city of LA discovered over 250 barrels of toxic waste buried on this block in 1984, and found that the occupants of the property had been dumping toxic waste into the sewers at 141 West Avenue 34 for years. Soon after, they sentenced the business owners to 6 months in jail. It was described at the time as a landmark case, one of the first of its kind to give a significant jail sentence for industrial pollution. There's dozens of news articles about this fiasco from the time. And incredibly, although we brought this to the attention of DTSC during the public comment period, which is when we found it, DTSC's site characterization doesn't mention any of this at all. They didn't investigate the sewers despite this evidence of direct dumping into the sewers. And we've since learned that the city had an ownership interest in the property in the 1980s when the pollution occurred. We also learned that the city destroyed their own records about the prosecution of this case within a few months of the first version of this project being submitted to city planning in 2016. Our neighborhood is frightened to know that these vapors might be intruding into our homes and into the school, but we're equally concerned that the cleanup plan is dangerous by not testing off-site, not investigating the sewers, not cleaning the site up to federal residential safety standards when they calculate for vapor attenuation. Some of our elected officials, including County Supervisor Hilda Solis, U.S. Representative Jimmy Gomez, State Assembly Member Wendy Carrillo, our incoming council member Eunices Hernandez, have written letters in support of the community's efforts, calling on DTSC to do more testing, to do more stringent cleanup, calling on the EPA to get involved. And expert geologists have also supported us and weighed in, confirmed that our worries are valid, and have pointed out flaws in the cleanup proposal. The case has been fought by neighbors all on our own, passionate about identifying and remediating these hazards to our families. And if the project moves forward as planned, I believe that it would set a dangerous precedent for how the city and state could hide or ignore evidence of toxic hazards and allow substandard cleanup in residential areas. So I want to, in addition to our neighbor working, neighbors on the block working, I do want to give a shout out to several other people who have helped us, including Robina Sewell, Jane Williams, Angelo Baloma, who've all given countless hours advising us and helping to give us some direction here. And we've engaged a wide variety of departments and enforcement agencies along the way. We first learned about this project through our neighborhood council. And I want to give a shout out to neighborhood councils in general as an important instrument for communicating local concerns and being able to relay those concerns from communities to the city, and also as a vehicle for informing neighborhoods about what's happening in their neighborhood. After we learned about it through them, we engaged LA City Planning, and they have been a consistent obstruction to our efforts through all of this, I'm sad to say. They never mailed us instructions when we filed our City Planning Commission appeal on how to present an appeal. We found out just a couple days before our appeal had been scheduled, and they never sent us documents about how to present a slideshow, things like that. It was really a scramble for us to present our case. And of course, like I said, the city reviewed their own index of potentially hazardous properties when they defended the city's position at that appeal hearings, because their own documents specifically showed that this site was likely contaminated, and yet they allowed this environmental review that said just the opposite, which I would like to point out was a mitigated negative declaration rather than an environmental impact review, which would have required public comment and more scrutiny. We've tried to engage LA Unified School District. seeing as how this is such close proximity to a public school, but we've been surprised at how disinterested they have seemed in taking up any of our concerns. They've even sent misleading emails to some concerned parents who wrote them, making it seem as though they had tested the school for this contamination, although they had not. I think we've actually found more willing conversations with agencies before they have been drawn into this case. DTSC in particular, I had several very fruitful conversations with early on with their staff. They helped us confirm several misstatements in the environmental review, the city's environmental review for this project, and gave us some perspective on what some of the risks of this kind of contamination might be. That was before they got involved. And as soon as the project proponent began corresponding with DTSC, they took on a very different tone, which is really unfortunate. And currently, for example, they're refusing to enforce the soil management plan for the cleanup in several important regards. This has led to significant off-tracking of soil from the site, and the developer is piling stockpiles of soil right against the fence in front of the school, which is explicitly forbidden in the soil management plan. I could go on. So that's DTSC. With South Coast Air Quality Management District, they've been very responsive, but on the phone, but I think they have a limitation where they have to actually witness violations. So even if we send them photos and videos, they don't do any sort of enforcement unless they come to the site several hours later and the same violation is still happening. Some of our, like I said, some of our best and most fruitful allies or conversations have come from agencies that don't have any explicit oversight over this. So US EPA has actually been very helpful. And although they don't have any jurisdiction over this project, we've had several great conversations with them. Their staff has reviewed DTSC's cleanup plan and came to several of the same conclusions that our community had, that this site characterization was inadequate, that it lacked adequate testing, that it wasn't meeting the correct attenuation factors for the cleanup, et cetera, et cetera. And while they don't have enforcement capabilities at this point over this project, their voice has been really helpful in getting our elected representatives to advocate for the community's concerns. LA Sanitation is another department that, although it doesn't have explicit oversight over the project itself, weighed in recently with a letter where they also reviewed DTSC's cleanup plan, and they also, independently of our concerns, came to several of the same points, saying that there should have been more testing, and that there should have been more chemicals that were identified on the property should have been labeled as chemicals of concern. And they gave very good reasons for why that should be, even when those chemicals are below certain thresholds. In cumulative concentrations, they can pose very serious risks. So we're hoping that LA San will continue to be an ally and advocate in this. And I guess the latest news that I can share about the project is that DTSC recently did require new testing on the property just in the last few weeks, right up to the fence line, which confirmed what we've been saying all along. DTSC is now agreeing with our conclusion, in contradiction to their conclusion just a few months ago, that the contamination almost certainly extends beyond the property boundaries, and they're going to require testing beyond the property to determine what risks the contamination here poses to residences and businesses across the street. While this is what we've been calling for, I feel a little disheartened that this is happening months after their CEQA review process is concluded, and that their CEQA review process doesn't include any of this information, even any characterization of the illegal activities which we know happened on the site. It seems like an intentional way to exclude this information from the official record and from the sorts of actions that would be required under CEQA. But we're continuing to fight and hoping that this moves in a direction. You know, our only effort through all of this has been to make sure that the site is adequately characterized and then adequately remediated to protect the neighbors the people who work across the street, the school children, and of course the future residents of the site. And that's our story.
Wow, Michael, I have to say I've been doing this for a really long time, and it sounds like a particularly bad situation, but it also is reminiscent of the experiences of so many different people having to step up and engage in their community's protection because no one else is willing to. And without your work, it sounds, and evidently you've done a very successful job of organizing your community and getting them out and engaged. But without your work, this project just would have moved forward and the apartments would have been built, right? I mean, there was no kind of, nothing in the existing system would have raised these red flags or brought attention to this had you not been involved. And it doesn't sound to me like, you know, your training has always been in site remediation, site assessment, hydrogeology, geology, CEQA, and permitting, and government relations or enforcement, yet you have all that expertise that's been developed. When you look back on it, do you think that there's anything else that could have gone differently had people been paying attention and doing their jobs?
Oh, certainly. So, you know, the red flags that we noticed are red flags that were available to the people whose job it is to assess these things and make sure that these projects are safe. Like I said, city planning had this property on an index of likely contaminated properties in our neighborhood. So that should have been the first red flag, but they completely ignored that. And I don't have any education in this area, and it's been a steep learning curve for the past 2.5 years. But I think that you know, I also recognize that I'm fortunate. I am not typical of the demographics in my neighborhood, and I recognize that I have an educational background and a more flexible work schedule than most people in my neighborhood do. And I think that the kind of blatant disregard for clear environmental risks that the city was steamrolling this project over to build without doing any testing and without doing any remediation would never have happened in a neighborhood where they thought there was a more educated or more powerful or wealthier populace. And I think I'm convinced that this kind of project is being chosen specifically in neighborhoods like Lincoln Heights because they think that the people are vulnerable and they can exploit those vulnerabilities, lack of education, lack of free time. And, you know, even with so many people in immigrant communities, a fear of, with good reason, a fear of confronting authorities in the government. And I think this project is not just an indication of like failures of our agencies to do their jobs correctly, but an explicit like targeting of vulnerable communities.
Yeah, we've seen that time and again, but we've also seen time and again people like you stepping up, getting involved, educating yourself, finding ways in which to use the decision-making process to your advantage to prevent things from happening. What's the exact status right now? What are the next steps?
Well, you know, there's a lot in the air right now. The project is moving forward as we speak with the cleanup, and the developers are moving, you know, doing this cleanup is designed really in concert with their construction plans. The area of soil that they're excavating happens to be the same soil that they would have excavated anyway for their underground parking lot. Several things like that. So they're fully moving forward, and city planning has approved the project. But we are, we've filed our community group filed a lawsuit, just asking for, we're not asking for any money. We're only asking for them to follow state and federal guidelines in regards to assessment and cleanup standards. And we pointed out several ways in which this project deviates from those. And so we're trying to make that happen through whatever means we can. And like I said, we're reaching out to the EPA, reaching out to our elected officials, and I believe they're putting pressure on DTSC that has led to this recent testing in the past few months outside of the whole CEQA review process. And I can only imagine that is through the efforts of the pressure that DTSC is feeling from our elected representatives and from EPA that has written them letters in just the past few months, saying that they're still not happy with the way this project is going.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Michael. I hope you're going to stick around. Like I said, we're going to have different presentations from different people, and then we're going to have question and answers around 12:15 after our second break. So everyone who has questions for Michael and would like to talk with him about that, we're going to wait till that area and give everyone else an opportunity to speak to. So thank you, Michael, for your presentation and sharing your story. Ken Zutu with the Clean Air Monitoring Network has a little bit of a different story in terms of what he's been doing in Northern California with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And I think Sarah's going to post his bio here. Here's the work he's been doing in Vallejo, described in the chat. Ken, I'll turn it over to you to talk about how, when, and why you got involved in air quality monitoring and what happened once you did, and how you worked with the enforcement agencies to try to improve upon the air quality in Vallejo.
Thank you, Joe. This is Ken Zutu from Citizen Air Monitoring Network in Vallejo. I have been attending the symposium webinar for a while, and it's an honor to be here to share our story with the rest of the community. Vallejo, first of all, I think probably many people don't know where Vallejo is. Vallejo is in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's between San Francisco and Sacramento. And also, we have in the Bay Area, we have 5 refineries in the Bay Area, and many of them are just around the city of Vallejo. Even though we don't have one within our city limit, but we have 2 on one side and 3 on the other side. So it depends on where the wind blows, and very often we got the downwind. I started to get involved in community work and in air quality work started from 2016. So I haven't worked in the community or in the air quality area for a long time, like some of the people here. But during the 6 years, we have been through 2 major events. One is we have a cement plant proposal, which basically there is a business proposal to put a cement plant on our waterfront, and the advertisement is dust-free cement plant, and you know how dust-free a cement plant can be. So anyway, we fought this for 5 years, and eventually we got a California Attorney General's office involved, and they wrote us a letter, or the applicant a letter, about their EIR shortcoming And I think that's one of the major reasons, because first of all, we were fighting with the applicant, and then the Attorney General's office is involved, and that makes them to drop their proposal. So that is one. And the other one is we have a refinery oil spill with toxic film sending over to our city. And we have over 100 people sent to the emergency room during that incident. And I think one thing which Joe will ask is, what is the result of that? The result of that is actually even up to today, no one is held accountable for the harm that incident brought to our community. And actually a lot of things which I'm going to talk about this is what we learn by going through this event and working with a different agency. And we feel like after we spent 6 years, we have some tips on how to work with agency more efficiently. And that's what I want to share with the rest of the group. So because I was not involved in air quality in the past. So basically what that means is we didn't know what was done, how things are done in the past. So basically when we run into the situation like the refinery oil spill situation, we started with what we believe things should be done. And I think this is kind of because we are not constrained by what how things were done before. So I think this has become very useful under the AB 617. And as you can see here, the oil spill basically happened in 2016. That's before the AB 617 get enacted into the law. So at that time, agency were not paying attention to the community level. So next slide, please.
Ken, should we just explain real quickly what AB 617 is for those people who don't know? It was a law that was authored by Assemblymember Cristina Garcia in order to provide some protections to impacted communities across California. And it included a lot of different aspects to it, including monitoring requirements, prioritization, and the increase in fines. It included a whole lot of different things, including a process by which the different priority communities would be identified, and emission reduction plans and monitoring plans would be created.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Actually, I need to go back to the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. So basically, I'm going to talk about, as Joe asked, like what is AB 617, and what is the difference, and what is the impact of AB 617 to the community. I think before AB 617 was enacted into law in 2017, I think the main focus for the agency is in Clean Air Act, which is the regional air quality level and the attainment status. So basically, for example, because of that, I think all the attention and effort and money was basically focusing on measuring regional air quality. But as we know, all from our community member knows, like even within our own community, the air quality is different in different part of our city. And I think AB said, from a community's members' point of view, AB 617 basically put the spotlight and say, okay, we need to pay attention to the regional, but also we need to pay attention to a community level air quality. And I think that's a tremendous change. And because even though it is a big change, but unfortunately, many people don't understand or not realizing the change, what the change the AB 617 is bring to the system. Okay, so and many people don't understand the community, because AB 617 basically say, okay, we need to pay attention to community needs, but many people don't understand the community needs for several reasons. For example, even community member, we assume the agency knows what to do. So for example, during the oil spill in our situation, our immediate response when that happened is we said, okay, we're going to talk with the air district because they must know. This is such a big event and they must know. And then through the process, we find out the conclusion is the air district doesn't pay attention to this level of air quality. So actually they don't know about what happened. And that's the reason why no one is held accountable up to today, because we don't have data. We don't have any monitoring information. So first of all, so on the community level, community member don't understand the need, and because at the time we think, okay, the agency will take care of us, but at the same time, the agency is settled in the clean air routine, which basically that's what they have been doing for the last 30 years. And they are basically, this is a repeat what they have established a system to satisfy the Clean Air Act. And so they are not paying special attention unless there's a push from the community side. So so that is something what we realize is many times, like we see agency is not doing it, and actually it's not they are on purposely like not doing it, but they don't even understand what we need. So one thing which I learned is we need to find out from agency and the good people working in the agency. Good people means they will listen to the community and they are open to change. And one of the area which you can find this kind of good people you can work with is to attending, for example, the symposium like this. And very often we have high level people from agency, and they talk and they will answer your question. And this is a perfect venue to get connected and find out who is actually working with the community. For example, when I attended this symposium quite a few months ago, and I get connected with Todd Sachs from the CARB, and for example, he is very helpful to us. So okay, thank you. Next slide. So one thing which I want to talk about this is a community advisory council from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and this is one of this is a new council which we have been in there for. Currently I'm a council member of the Community Advisory Council, and the purpose for the Community Advisory Council is to bring community concern to the board level. Okay, so the council was established less than a year ago, so we are still working on it. I wanted to share some of the work which we have been working on, and just to let you know what we have been looking at and what are the things we think needs to be improved. So one thing is we call community engaged agenda setting, and I think for all the people, community member attending agency meeting, I think one thing which we feel like we need to do is, because we need to be able to set the agenda. So the agenda selection is one thing which we do to enable the community to participate in Community Advisory Council. The second one is agenda presentation preparation, because usually when you go to an agency meeting and the staff spend weeks and months to prepare a presentation, and very often without any community engagement. And then if the community find out 72 hours before the meeting, and if the community does not agree with the presentation, then, for example, we only have 3 minutes to talk about this. So think about this. This is a completely unbalanced in power. Like basically the staff will do a 30 minutes presentation, and then each individual public have up to 3 minutes and to talk about something really complicated. And then the worst thing is if you have more people, then you only give like 1 minute, because we have too many people today in the meeting, we only give you 1 minute. So this is something which we are looking at, and we wanted to change that. The other one is we call a community engaged enforcement. Like Michael just mentioned before, is like, okay, people reported problem, but when the inspector came to your site, say a day or several days after your report, and the violation is not there anymore. So I think there is a place where the community and agency can work together, because the community's strength is we are there 24/7, and the agency's strength is the resource or the money and expertise. So I think there's something we should be able to work together and to take the advantage for the strength from each side and make the enforcement better. Okay, so that is, and also community level monitoring, which I'm going to talk about next. Okay. Yeah, rulemaking and enforcement. During this, for example, when we trying to follow through with this oil spill situation in our city, what we find out is a lot of time the rulemaking, when we look at the rule, the enforcement part is very vague, or you have a rule, but the enforcement, it's not clear how to enforce that rule. So I think the suggestion is, or the recommendation to our rulemaking division is, when we do rulemaking, we have to consider enforcement, and also the default thinking should be like somebody is going to violate the law, so the rule. So what are you going to do when the rule is violated? And it needs to be implementable. And I don't think that has been taken into consideration right now. And okay, so this is like, for example, like when we design a complex system, we have to make sure something, the default thinking is something will go wrong, and how can you find the problem? Okay, and okay, I will go next one. Community level monitoring. It's basically, even though we are talking about the focuses in AB 617 is community level air quality, but when we think about what capacity a community really have right now, okay, I don't think we have a lot of, for example, you see purple air is on one level, but a lot of time purple air, that's the community level monitoring, but very often that is done by the community. And for example, I think the state have a program called Diesel Free 2033. But for example, like in my community, I don't even have a capability to measure diesel in my community. And I don't know how we are going to track this Diesel Free 2033. Like, that's what I mean, like on community level or Mathian. And we don't have a equipment which enable us to measure. And if we are going to manage our air quality, we have to based on data. And if we don't have monitoring capability, there's no data. And that, I think that's one of the major shortfall which we need to fix. Okay, I think I'm over the time, so I will
just by a couple of minutes. So we're okay. Thank you, Ken. What we will circle back. Please stick around, and we're gonna hear from Florence, and we're gonna have a break, hear from the other speakers, and then we're gonna do the question and answers. And I'd love to ask you some questions, but I'm not gonna do it now because, like you said, went over by a couple of minutes. No big deal. We're still on time. But thank you for all of that and your observations and your experiences in Vallejo, and working on your air quality monitoring and the various rules and regulations and aspects and things like that. Okay, Ken?
Thank you.
All right,
Joe.
thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Florence Garibian with the Del Amo Action Committee. She is the chair of the Del Amo Action Committee. We say on behalf of Jan Kalani because Jan's having some health issues and unable to join us today. But I think it's a special opportunity to hear from Florence because Florence has lived two lives. One more recently as the chair of the board of directors of the Del Amo Action Committee. But her life before then and before officially retiring was, I can't remember your title, Florence, but you were the person at the Department of Toxic Substances Control that we would go to solve all problems related to enforcement. And so Florence was that regulator at the Department of Toxic Substance Control, as if my Spanish is good here, 25 años. So 25 years working there, and just one of those diamonds in the rough, and things at DTSC can get pretty rough sometimes, and it's hard to find the diamonds, although we have a few of them with us, at least a couple of them I've seen with us today in this webinar. But Florence provides a perspective that's very different because she understands incredibly well what it means to be on the inside of an agency trying to do the best that you can to protect these environmental justice communities. And then she has also spent this second life of hers working diligently with Cynthia and the other members of the Del Amo Action Committee to deal with one of the most complex and problematic contaminated sites I've ever come across. So are you ready for us, Florence?
Yes, I am. I think I am a diamond in the rough and getting rougher every day. So that's what it is. So I want to say first how much I appreciate the comments of the previous speakers, which were just tremendous. There are things that we share in the Del Amo Action Committee. The first thing I want to say is I came in contact with Cynthia Babich, who is truly the most amazing person, who could not work harder for her community for years. I think we're up to 25 years. The second, we have 2 federal Superfund sites in our community. One of them is a site where synthetic rubber was produced during World War II, and the other one is the largest manufacturer of DDT in the country, which operated from 1947 till 1980 when it was shut down. And the contamination from that site affects every area of the environment in very serious ways, both in our community and also damage that was done when the DDT went into the Pacific Ocean. I was the environmental justice coordinator for DTSC for 3 years, for a little, it was actually longer than 3 years. I was handed that job, not necessarily anticipating it. Before that, I was the branch chief for the enforcement program in the Los Angeles area. But I want to mention something that we did that made a difference. First of all, we got enforcement involved in our work for pretty much the first time. Then we did tours in several locations in the state where we heard directly from community members about what their environmental difficulties were. And we had a meeting after the tour, and then we came back in 100 days, and bringing the enforcement people on board, reassuring community members that we'd be back. Several of the things that we did in that process were tremendous. And that's where I met Cynthia, because we worked with the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network and Cynthia on doing that work. And I got acquainted with her, so that when I retired, I started working with the network and working with Cynthia, and have done so since I retired in May of 2011. I'm here to talk on the behalf of Jan Kalani, who has lived in the community for over 40 years. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that many of the people who are in the community have been there for a very long time, and possibly their children, their grandchildren, etc. That's important. So there are people who think, well, why don't you just move somewhere else? That is not necessarily a decision that people can make. So there are many people just making the best of it. We heard about, from the previous speakers, how difficult it is to communicate, first of all, to really understand what's going on in your community, and then to communicate it to other community members. And we know that from experience. In the case of Jan Kalani, she didn't even know that she had a DDT area right next door. And this DDT came from years of stormwater runoff from the Montrose chemical plant. Beginning in 1947, when there were no rules or regulations governing the management of DDT, through the time when the programs came on board and the site began to be monitored more carefully, and then with the closing of the site that happened in 1980. So a lot of the pollution issues went on for years. The first time that Jan found out that there was a presence of DDT in soil right on the other side of her fence was when EPA came out to test the soil in her front yard. They came out, they didn't really explain what they were doing. They took samples in the yard, and in my knowledge, they never told Jan what they had found. But the fact that they were there made Jan aware of the property next door, and the fact that she had raised her children in the house that she lives in now, and her children would go over to that, what apparently was a vacant lot, and play over there. And so she had no idea what was really happening. Now she has the conflict of wondering if any health issues that her children have might have come from where they lived. And this is a shared emotion and a shared concern with anyone who lives in one of these neighborhoods. The property that was next door to Jan's home was used by a hazardous waste and emergency response cleanup contractor. And there were several concerns, particularly odors that would be coming from whatever it was that this contractor was doing. and go through the community. And the contractor was not responsive to her concerns or concerns from other community members. What happened in 2015 is that ECI decided they wanted to sell the property. They had a home builder come on board, and the home builder agreed to pay for the removal of the DDT on the eastern portion of the site. So there were 2 removals of soil in that area while Jan has been living right there. The first one was when ECI began an effort to clean up the eastern portion of their site on their own without any directive from any regulatory agency. They dug the soil out of the trench and put it on the top of put it next to this trench. And until they were ordered by EPA to cover that soil and eventually get it shipped away for a permit to a permitted facility, a lot of what happened really was generated by community complaints regarding the fact that the dust from those 2 piles was blowing into the community. Now, one might imagine that would never happen again. But in 2015, as I mentioned earlier, ECI had an opportunity to sell their property and have a company that wanted to build homes on that property purchase it. And this company agreed to pay for the cleanup on the eastern portion of the property. As a result of a very poorly managed, very inadequate cleanup process, they dug a deep trench right below the wall that Jan had put up for her patio. And as a result of that work, she had serious damage to her home. If you look at this picture, you will see some of the soil that they dug up and her patio right above it. And you will also see a white layer of material. Cynthia and I hiked up the hill to see what was going on the site. And when we did that, we saw the white layer of material. Now, we demanded that DTSC go out there and sample that material, but that's not what happened. Instead, the company's contractor took a very small vial of a sample of this white material, and when they got the test results back, they contained several pesticides. What happened to that material? Is it still there? Was it put in the trench? God knows. But the damage to Jan's home was very serious. So we went and talked to her as part of that visit and saw the damage that had been done to her home. And I'd like all of you to think about, what would you do if something happened next door to your home, and as a result, your ceiling was caving in, your floor was uneven, etc. As a matter of fact, work that we did with another organization called STAND resulted in Jan getting some money to help clean up this problem with her home. And she's kind of midway in that very difficult effort right now. But when Jan realized how seriously the properties may be contaminated in her air and her concerns about her family and community health, she joined the Del Amo Action Committee, and she has been a tremendous blessing to our work. Her goal was to bring attention to the community about the potential risks of living in the area. As things evolved, Jan became kind of a detective. So she would take her camera out and take pictures of trucks lined up waiting to go into another warehouse, of what was happening on the ECI property, etc., and became quite good at doing that work. And the pictures that she took have been a great deal of help in the work that the Del Amo Action Committee is doing. Also, I want to mention that she participated in 2 major efforts with the Del Amo Action Committee. One of them was to count the number of trucks that were going through our community. And the other one was something that I am so proud of and am really so pleased that this could be done, because the Del Amo Action Committee organized a public health survey and went to the community directly next to the Del Amo site where the synthetic rubber was produced, and to the community on the other side of Torrance Boulevard, and did this health survey with community volunteers and the help of the public health, LA County Public Health Department. That was a tremendous accomplishment and is a tremendous accomplishment. And Jan helped to make that happen. The ecology control industries on the neighboring property had their own problems. They had never received a county CUP. They were very sloppy operators. They contributed to off-facility traffic. And somewhere in the midst of this going on, one of the conflicts we have with the Del Amo Action Committee is that we have both City of LA and County of Los Angeles areas in our community, and where those areas are located is a very difficult thing to figure out, because, for example, there's an area called the Del Amo Alley, where if you're in the alley, you're in LA County, and if you go across the alley, you're in the City of LA. So that has posed some problems in our getting the kind of help that we need. Right now, Jan is having serious health problems, as is her husband, who is a Vietnam veteran. And I pray that they both can heal and get better. But she has had such a struggle in living in this house and everything that happened. And one of the things I want to be sure to mention is, as other speakers have mentioned, when she discovered this, when this damage to her house happened, she called EPA, she called the Department of Toxic Substances Control, she called the planning department, she called anybody she could think of to call. And the only thing that really happened was a lot of people saying it wasn't their responsibility, that they couldn't do anything about it, and a fellow who came in and told her that he might red tag her house. So when we showed up and she could see that we were people that really cared, that she could work with, I think it was a very big relief. And as always, one of the speakers mentioned Todd Sachs. Todd Sachs is now working in a task force with the Del Amo Action Committee to identify problems in our community and take action to do something about those problems. And when we did a tour of our community with the ARB people that are working on this and others, and Todd went to Jan's house, looked over the fence, looked at the warehouse going up there, and had no problem understanding how painful all of this was for her. So I could tell a much longer story, but the common denominators are, you want to get your community involved. You want to assume, as was mentioned earlier, that people know that everything is not okay, because very often, as was mentioned earlier, people think that these situations are under control when they really aren't. Also, to get the regulators to go to your community and see what you're dealing with is so important. And as you can see from the other speakers, all of this is continuous hard work that never stops. And you get some things accomplished and you don't get other things accomplished. And your victories can often be very hard to identify. So it's tough work. It can feel very hopeless. I can tell you for sure that sometimes you just feel like crying. There's nothing else you can do. So I could talk a lot longer about all of this because it's a much longer story than I've told today.
But you can't, because we run out of time.
Right. I never thought I wouldn't run out of time. And I'll just mention one more thing. I absolutely hate this process where you go to a meeting and the regulatory agency talks and talks and talks, and then they tell you there's so many people there, you get 1 minute. That just is something I find very, very not the right way to do things when you're working with the community. So that's my final comment on the
All right.
subject.
Thank you, Florence. We do have a couple of things to take care of. The first is to tell everyone that after the break, please be sure to come back, because we're going to hear from Susie DeSantiago from Cudahy Alliance for Justice and their work on Park Avenue Elementary School and the proposed KIPP Charter School, and Bianca Helme with Valley Improvement Projects and the wonderful work they've been doing in the San Joaquin Valley, and then with Caroline, who's going to talk about some of the insights she has from her consulting work on environmental justice issues. So please don't go away. But before we do, Cynthia, I think you wanted to do a poll, right?
Yes, we're gonna just launch a poll. We're trying to really glean how many people are on the Spanish and English channels. I seem to be concerned or preoccupied with the fact that I want to make sure that folks that are on the Spanish channel are given enough time if they have questions. So this is the one way that we thought that we could get at it. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back to Joe to lead us into our break.
We're watching the poll results come in. So we've got most of you have participated, but not all of you. Maybe because I think those of us who are co-hosts maybe don't get to do the poll. I don't know. But as they say in Sacramento, those who wish to vote, please vote. That's the common language there in Sacramento. You're given a few chances. Those who wish to vote, please vote. And those who wish to vote, please vote. And we have at least a couple of people using the Spanish language channel, and the majority of people using the English language channel. So that's good to know. 82% participation, not bad. But given the group that we have and the issues we're talking about, we expect people to participate. Okay, Cynthia, is that good? You got that?
Perfect. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I appreciate it.
We'll end the poll. Like I said, the vast majority seem to be listening in English, but there are a couple of people who are listening to the interpretation, and thank you to the interpreters. We're going to take 10 minutes, come back at just after 11:30. Please go take care of all your needs. biological text and email, and come back because we're going to hear from Susie DeSantiago about the really crucial issues in Southeast Los Angeles and Cudahy and the environmental justice problems that have been happening over there. So I'm going to turn my video off and come back in 10 minutes and reconvene. Thank you. Okay. Well, just like the common cold, we are back. I say that because I've got a couple of sick people in my house right now. I'm avoiding them like the plague. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking around for our Community Voices webinar from the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network. Cynthia, I think I'll leave it up to you to share the news about filling out the survey.
Excellent. Sarah's going to post a link for our evaluation into the chat, and we'll also mention at the end. It really helps us a lot to get your feedback so that we can kind of shape next year's symposiums. So thanks a lot.
Just click through that link and fill out the survey, folks. Thank you. Okay, Susie DeSantiago has been waiting for us so patiently, and now's her chance to talk about the issues that she confronted, how she got involved in protecting her community, the community of Cudahy, and what the Cudahy Alliance for Justice has been doing with Park Avenue Elementary School and the situation there, and as well as the proposed KIPP charter school. And if there are other things, I don't know if you're talking about the fact that, you know, airplanes like to dump diesel fuel in your community or anything, or jet fuel in your community or anything like that. But Cudahy is one of those communities in Southeast Los Angeles that bears the brunt of a lot of I gotta say, you know, racist policy and planning decisions that have truly impacted their community for many decades. So I'll turn it over to you, Susie, and let you go ahead and tell us your story.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. Well, my name is Susie DeSantiago, and I live in Cudahy. I've been living here for about 35 years. So this is where I raised my family. So pretty familiar with my community. So that's what, like, you know, once you're familiar with your community, you're able to be aware and help bring awareness. That's like one of the issues in my community. So next slide, please. So I'm gonna, sorry about this. I was just bringing my screen up. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking regarding the issues and the concerns that, like I was saying, we have in our community. So in my community where we live, we're a low-income, Latino, working class community that's mostly Spanish speaking. And so because of that language barrier, there's getting information from our city is not that easily accessible. And so that's like one of the main issues that we also had to fight for. And so luckily, the city did hear us, and they are now providing information in Spanish. So it's making it a little better, but we're still not at where we need to be. And you know, I am also going to speak regarding, like Joe said, regarding Park Avenue and everything that's been happening at Park Avenue. Unfortunately, that's like our main, one of our main concerns here. And also regarding a new school that is potentially going to be built on a toxic site, just like Park Avenue was. Next slide, please. So Park Avenue Elementary, as you can see here, was built in 1968 on a former unregulated toxic or dump site. This is where children, teachers, parents, they were directly exposed to petroleum, sludge, you know, while the children are playing on the playground. This is some of the things that as the sludge was coming out on the playground, the kids would come out and they would just get it, and they would, you know, they thought it was like some sand or something. Kids don't know any better, so they were just, you know, curious. A lot of teachers and students that were there, they developed health issues. Some of them even had miscarriages. They had major chronic illnesses like cancer as well too. So, but it's, as you can imagine, it's hard to pinpoint where these diseases or the cause of these diseases are from. But if you take a tally, like some of the teachers did there at the school, they saw that a lot of them were getting these illnesses. So that's what when they started getting concerned, started reaching out. And so in 1990, because of the concerns that the teachers had and the parents had, the school was finally closed so that it could be cleaned up, because they did find out that it was contaminated. And a few months later, the school was reopened. But then, unfortunately, because the cleanup or the remediation that they did was not a thorough cleanup, it was just like on the surface. So as you can imagine, all these previous exposures that the kids and the parents had in 1990, again in 2001 or in 2000, around 2000, they started to have this again. And again, the same process. Parents, community had to get together and force, to get the attention of our city council, of the Department of DTSC, and finally, again, the school was closed down in 2001. And this time, they actually did a thorough cleanup, and that's why it took about 3 years before the school was reopened. So then, you think things are getting better, but then what happens in 2020, January 2020, that's when we have Delta, because we're on the path of where planes pass by. Delta decides for whatever reason that they're going to dump fuel. And it just happened to be that it was at Park Avenue. So Park Avenue has suffered a lot. Park Avenue School, the parents, the community, the surrounding people that live there also suffered from the Delta fuel jump. So it wasn't just limited to Park Avenue. So because of this, I've been involved in my community. I started being involved in about 2011 by attending meetings, city meetings, and just getting informed. And that's how I found out about the construction that was going to happen just like 2 blocks from my house. And that's where KIPP Pueblo Unido, which is a charter school, they had applied for a development review permit, or I'm sorry, a development building permit. So a few of us, not too many, but there was just probably like 10 community members. And I'm thankful that they showed up. The reason is because, at first, people from our community, they don't feel like they're empowered and they're nervous. So they don't really want to speak up. But I had been speaking before, so I felt comfortable. But once they saw that not just me, but a few others were speaking and trying to have our concerns addressed, they also spoke. And so that shocked KIPP, because they weren't prepared for that, because they were just prepared to just everything flowing smoothly. Nobody was going to be saying anything negative about what was happening. So fortunately, the Planning Commission, they heard us and they agreed with what we were exposing to them or explaining to them, and they denied the building permit. So then, as KIPP, it's a school, they have money, they decided that they were going to appeal the building, the decision that the Planning Commission had. So in September of 2020, it was probably, because we started spreading the word. I and a few other community members, we started spreading the word about what was happening. So we were able to get not only people to show up online and, you know, let the city council know what was happening, what our concerns were. It was probably about 2 hours of public comment and also emails that were sent because we made sure that people, if they couldn't show up on Zoom, that they at least had their voices heard by sending an email. And so, you know, unfortunately, the city council did approve the permit, but we didn't give up. We didn't give up. You know, we were just flabbergasted that the city illegally approved the building permit because they classified this permit as a ministerial project. And what that means that it's a building that they just have to do like minor repairs and the process can continue. But this was not minor repairs. This was a building that was in existence for over 90 years. It was a metal foundry. And, you know, all those chemicals that they use, and probably back then, they didn't have to go through processes that other metal foundries have to go through now. So we didn't give up. We decided, you know, we're going to continue fighting this. So we got advice from an attorney, just like what Lincoln Heights did. We also got advice from an attorney, and we formed Cudahy Alliance for Justice, which is the group that I'm with now. And so we followed the advice of our council, and you know, we did everything that we could to you know, try to ensure and protect our community. Next slide. Some of the ways that we approached this was by holding protests. We protested during the pandemic at the site where KIPP wanted to build. We also protested at the city council homes, at the KIPP board members' homes. And, you know, we also reached out to other community groups that were facing the same issues as we were, or similar issues. We reached out to them to, like, you know, get ideas how, you know, we could fight this multi-millionaire company in comparison to a community, a community that is, like I said before, low income, Spanish speaking, and most of the time they're just, you know, it's a working class community. So we had to do a lot of organizing from the community. We also reached out to CalEPA, to DTSC. And so fortunately, in reaching out to other community groups, we were able to have DTSC come to our site, or come to the site where KIPP was planning to build. And we let them hear and not only and see and hear what our concerns were. You know, several of us spoke about what's happening and how the potential of the toxins that are in the reports that KIPP themselves did when they did an evaluation of the land. So there were a lot of toxins there, but you know, our city's building department, they, in my opinion, they ignored that. They ignored that because they still classified this project as a ministerial project. Next slide, please. And as you know, getting legal counsel is not, it's not cheap, it's expensive. So how did we go about having that? We had to have community fundraisers. Like, as you can see here, we had a Pupusa fundraiser. We had yard sales. We had GoFundMes. We asked for donations from anybody and anybody and everybody that either we knew or didn't know. You know, it was just word spreading, and it was amazing the support that we were receiving from not only our community, but you know, the gatherings that we were having, because people were donating because they believed in the cause that we had, even though a lot of people even though some people were telling us or trying to discourage us because they were saying, no, you guys, how are you going to stand up to this corporation? You guys aren't going to win. They know what they're doing. The city knows what they're doing. The community, how do you guys know? So we always had that, that issue, but we never gave up. The community never gave up. We continued. Next slide. And so another that we did was raising awareness. And how did we do that? We had community forums where we provided the community the same information that KIPP provided the city. So that way they knew the information was there and it was information from them. It was just getting it. It was just obtaining it and and the most difficult was understanding it, because you know those documents when they come, those reports when they come back, and with the studies, not everybody understands that language. So, you know, it was hard. So it was, you know, a learning experience. And so we had to educate ourselves. And right here, we have one of the flyers that we provided our community where it explains just briefly, because we tried to get their attention and we figured by doing it this way, we could get their attention. It talks about the toxins that that are there, which is like arsenic, PCE, and other gases. So that's, you know, information that we shared with the community. We also went on social media. We went on social media because we figured we can't just let it be here in our community. We have to spread the word so everybody knows what we're doing. So we went to social media and we had Facebook, Instagram, just, you know, any Twitter, I think we have also. So it was just, you know, getting the word out. It was getting the word out and letting people know so that, you know, if they also wanted to protect the community, they can join us and, you know, help us with ensuring that it doesn't happen. Next slide, please. So the progress that we have in this fight was, you know, after having numerous protests, and we filed a lawsuit. And the good thing that we learned in January of this year was that after we filed a lawsuit, the judge ruled in our favor. So you could imagine how excited we were when we got that news. So then, you know, after the court ruled in our favor, KIPP wanted to settle. And so we figured, okay, we'll give them a chance. We're not here to just say, no, you can't build, but we just want to make sure that you build this school safely, because we do not want another Park Avenue happening. And so, as you can imagine, we were in negotiations for several months, since shortly after, probably I think around February, we started negotiations back and forth because we weren't giving up. They wanted to do just like superficial remediation of the land, and we were, no. The reason we went for this fight was because we wanted a complete, thorough cleanup with the oversight with the city, oversight with DTSC, and also including and ensuring that the community was present and that there were community meetings. So we weren't giving up easily. And I guess because we put up a fight and we were determined, in October, we received notice that KIPP decided that they no longer wanted to build the school. So they filed a notice with the court to dismiss the case. So, you know, we were more excited because before it was just that they were going to build, but with some oversight, but now it was just no building at all. So next slide, please. So as like I said, you know, some of our victories, like I mentioned, were having the judge rule in our favor in January. And even after the judge ruled in our favor, KIPP continued to demolish the buildings. So even though they were told that you couldn't do anything until you do the EIR, the environmental report, they still continued with demolishing. So we again had to go to the court and get an order from the court to that KIPP had to cease all construction or demolition, and that the city had to put a halt on all this as well. And so then, you know, like I said, the school is not being built anymore. So we are very happy. We're ecstatic that, you know, our determination, the consistency, the support that we had from the community, and, you know, just having other community groups also participate, and having, you know, these talks also with TTSC, and especially also having an attorney that was working with us, that was guiding us, that was being, you know, very honest and letting us know, like, you know, leading us through the process. And we also, one of the things I forgot to mention, we also had press news. We also reached out to the news, but not many came to see whenever we reached out to them. Some of them did. And we were able to have a few articles in you know, printed and written in what we were doing. So, but you know, that's something that our community is not able to get the press out here for. When we have something like this that's happening, it's not easy to get the press to come down and do a report on what's happening, because I believe that if we had had more support from the press, we would probably have been able to end this sooner. And it would have been, you know, a lot easier too, I think. But nonetheless, we did manage to be successful in what we were doing, and, you know, just putting the word out there and ensuring that our city does not do or continue to do what they did before, and which is they had like a pattern of categorizing several projects as exemptions, as ministerial projects. So that's another win that we had, that the city is no longer making as many exemptions. They're being more careful because they know that the community is not going to take it anymore, that we are here and we're present at, if not all of the council meetings, we're present majority of them. So just, you know, having that consistency and putting the pressure with our local government is what needs to be done. And I just remembered one more thing that I wanted to share, is also working with not just our local representatives, but our state representatives as well. We also reached out to a few of them, and the only one that was willing to try to do something, not necessarily for this project, but for future projects, was Cristina Garcia. She was trying to help us with the Bill 2214, which was going to require charter schools to follow the same building requirements as a public school does. And that's all we were asking for. Just if a public school has to have protect the community, be safe, and they have to have CEQA and environmental reports done, then charter schools should also. The same goes with the making sure a building is safe when it comes to earthquake. So that's what we were working on, but unfortunately, because there was not much support from representatives, the bill died in appropriations. And that's the second time that we've done that. But, you know, just because it died once and twice doesn't mean that you give up. It just means that you continue doing this, continue spreading the word, because if it's not the community that speaks up, then nobody else is going to do it.
Thank you, Susie. It's an inspiring story of success. And I mean, it's just wonderful to hear how you were able to do that and engage effectively and prevail. You know, we don't win them all, but we win a lot of victories along the way. And you know, the legislation, you just don't give up. You know, sooner or later, keep working at it, because obviously it should be a level playing field for both charter schools and regular, you know,
Yes.
traditional schools. Bianca, are you still with us? I hope, because we are running a little behind here.
Of course, I'm here.
Okay. And from Valley Improvement Project and the work that you've been doing in the Central Valley, just wanted to let us know, you know, what you guys are doing, how you got involved, your personal story, maybe a little bit, and what happened once you got involved, and where enforcement, environmental enforcement plays into all of it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. I appreciate being able to be here with you all and listen to everybody's stories. And what I will share with you today isn't new. Everything I'm going to share has been kind of highlighted through everybody else's story, but I want to acknowledge and share with you all that I have a personal background and history as to the story that Susie just shared. I lived in Cudahy in the early 90s, and it was my brother who attended Park Avenue who also experienced some of these health effects and had symptoms of the exposure to this toxic site. Not only is Park Avenue on that toxic site, but so are the homes that are surrounding Park Avenue. So is the park, so is the library. These are all public spaces that we share. And, you know, it was mentioned earlier, Florence said, we can't just pick up and go. It's not that easy. And so a lot of us have, it's sad to see that, you know, Susie and the folks who live in Cudahy now are still struggling through the same issues. It's 2022 and we're still fighting for language justice, right? Equity. It's really unfortunate, but the stories that we're sharing here today are really great examples of how we, the people, power is what's making change. And sometimes we got to keep repeating ourselves like a broken record. And sometimes you'll see a new generation speaking to the same, you know, systems of oppression and the same issues. And so, you know, Susie, thank you for sharing that, sharing a little bit of the history that I experienced. And I appreciate learning is still happening. And if there's anything that I can do from the Central Valley, we have folks, you know, as part of a coalition across the state of many organizations, grassroots organizations that can come and support you in various ways, as you've been able to get support, right? The Cudahy Alliance, alliances and networking and coalition building are really important. And that's kind of what my story that I want to share with you all. Besides living in by Park Avenue and in Cudahy and seeing those, you know, struggles there and living through that, I was raised in LA, and now I live in the Central Valley, and I've lived here for almost 15 years. And so I've had to learn a little bit about, well, I have learned a little bit and a lot in some cases about the issues here in the Central Valley, which are not very different than those in LA, but they're unique, right? And so in the Central Valley, we have the worst air quality in the country. We, just like LA, we are non-attainment on air quality. We are ag country, agricultural business and industry rules the world here in the Central Valley. It is very conservative space, sometimes racist in our face, without very intentional. And so those are the kind of experiences that I experienced here, and I realized as I lived here for several years. And so in 2009, when Oscar Grant was killed at the BART station in San Francisco, I could not stay silent here in my new home. And so we started doing cop watching, and we started educating folks on the street about their rights, what to do, how to exercise their rights when police officers confront you in the home, in your car, or on the street. And so we, social justice got us into the environmental justice movement here because they're interconnected, inseparable. And so through learning about the historical actions and direct actions from community members against police violence, we also built networks with other families and learned their history, right? And what they remember. And so how VIP started was very much grassroots, right? We're for social and environmental justice, and our projects are about bringing people power. And it relies on collective memory and solidarity, just like the many stories highlighted here today. And so when we, I'll share a couple of things that, a couple of projects, and sorry if I'm all over the place. When I was invited to speak about successes and victories, I was like, oh, we don't have very many victories, right? There isn't one culminating event where we can say we've celebrated and we've, taken and moved on. Like, we're still fighting for the same things, right? We have several projects where we have to collaborate with agencies. And one example that I want to share with you about the collaboration and how we build people power was through learning about pesticides. And how we learned about pesticides was we applied for a grant, and we just wanted to do some really quick research about what are the issues on pesticide and water, and how is that affecting our people here in this area. And so through research, we received a lot of mentorship through the Californians for Pesticide Reform, a coalition of other organizations who are working on pesticide issues and work directly with the Department of Pesticide Regulation. Through their mentorship, we learned not only about local issues, and we're able to inform ourselves better about local issues, but statewide initiatives. And so recently, the governor allocated $10 million for a statewide pesticide notification system. And because we had already been engaging with our ag commissioner here locally, we were able to get our ag commissioner to agree to be part of a pilot program. And she launched it here in Grayson, which is a really disadvantaged community, predominantly Latino, low income, monolingual, and out in ag country, right? Like, it's surrounded, people's backyards are almond crops. And so we are very excited that, we count that as a success. It's not a victory, but it is, a step forward to where we can get what we need and what we want. And so through the statewide initiative that the Department of Pesticide Regulation is trying to implement, our voice is really important as we collaborate with other organizations to bring systems that actually work for the people. And so through communication and persistence, we're able to build relationships with people in Grayson to make sure that their voice is heard. We're all just trying to breathe. We're struggling. We're all living our regular lives. And some of us, on top of that, are volunteering or are working hard to bring social and environmental justice to these very same communities that are directly affected. And maybe where I don't live in Grayson, but Grayson is very personal to me. One of our co-founders, Emiliano Mataca, who is no longer with us, is from Grayson. And so there is no way that I can leave Grayson out of the picture, right? It's not my home. This is not my town. This is not mine. But it is our community, and we have to live together. And although this pilot program in Grayson is very unique, or is just centralized in Grayson, the pilot program is in the end going to inform a statewide notification system. And in the end, it's going to affect people in Cudahy. It's going to affect people in Fresno. It's going to affect people in Watsonville, all over the state. And so everybody's input is important, not just Grayson's. So, you know, we continue to work with the California for Pesticide reform. We're at the table with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, thanks to the connections that are already built with other organizations. The Central California Environmental Justice Network was very instrumental in our work in pesticides as they looked for grants during the pandemic to stipend people. We have, they kept us in mind, right? And so when Ayameen, the founder of the director of CCEJN, wrote a grant, she said, well, let's also help folks in Stanislaus County, right? We know those farm workers are also suffering. And these farm workers who are not able to get the stimulus package from the state or federal funds receive funds through VIP with the support of CCEJN, right? And so there's another example of why coalition building and networking and supporting one another, being in solidarity, has been very instrumental to our successes here in the Central Valley with Valley improvement projects. And so another example of why or how these networks and coalitions and being in solidarity with one another has been very instrumental for us is we have a coalition. It's called the California Environmental Justice Coalition, and it is made up of 80 grassroots organizations. Actually, there's over 80 grassroots organizations from LA to the Bay and in between, and actually even a little bit farther up north in Laytonville. And so we, through those networks, and this is not my success, right? But I want to give credit to folks who have created these, their own have had their own victories that empower what VIP is doing. And so in 2014, we had our first conference, and that's where that's where the, try not to use abbreviations, the California Environmental Justice Coalition first started, right? And so Kettleman City and the folks from that area sued the Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC, for violations of Title VI, where, you know, I mentioned we're still fighting for equal opportunities, equal rights, and equal representation. That's what environmental injustice looks like, right? And so because Kettleman City is fighting basic rights with DTSC, the coalition, every year we meet with all the environmental justice seats in government, and we let them have it, right? And somebody comes for the jugular, the others come for the kidney, and the other ones, you know, swoop their feet, because we're all coming at them. We're all experiencing issues that DTSC is not addressing. And as a coalition, we are able to build this force to be reckoned with, right? And so when folks like us are fighting toxic sites and they want to move it to another site, we say, no, you know, those are our people too. You can't just move the toxic site from my home and move it to Kettleman City, because we know Kettleman City and we know their struggles. And so everybody's success stories that you guys are sharing can become everybody's success stories, because we're learning from what all of your struggles have been. And then we can be able to say, I remember. Our collective memory is really important, right? I think some of you have mentioned in your stories that the cities or jurisdictions just got rid of documents. It's like, well, but the people remember, and intergenerational connections and intergenerational coalition building is really important, because our memory is what is holding these agencies accountable. When we remember here in Stanislaus County, when trying to look to my notes here, when the tire the tire facility there where they like recycled tires burned for weeks. It burned for weeks. And if it wasn't in a disadvantaged community and a community of people of color, low income, maybe it wouldn't have burned for weeks, right? But the people who lived in that area, like John Mataca, Rosena Mataca, Emiliano, and Arsenio and their whole family fought to make sure that that fire was put out. We learned and we benefited from that because now we're still fighting incineration here in Stanislaus County. In Stanislaus County, we have one of 2 waste incinerators. The other one is in Long Beach. And so when we work together, we're able to do things like pass a bill. We just recently passed a bill, and you know, this is a victory, and I didn't count it as a victory because I was like, I want to shut these people down. I don't want to have incineration in California. But what we did is we're starving the beast with this bill. AB 1857 just passed, thanks to Cristina Garcia, again, Susie. She has been very helpful and instrumental in moving forward with this bill that is not going to allow incineration to be considered recycling anymore. Right. And so through the networks with and coalition building with the folks in Long Beach, because we couldn't do this ourselves, right? The folks in Long Beach who are also fighting incineration, waste incineration, or waste to energy, however they want to greenwash it. We were able to pass that bill along with the help of other organizations like Californians Against Waste, the East Yards for East Yards Community for Environmental Justice, Earth Justice, and Grayson Community Neighborhood Council, folks that have this memory of long and historical and intentional environmental racism in our community have come together to make sure that we can have a bigger voice or a stronger voice. And I think that's just one of the things that I wanted to just to come across with our stories, and those are all things that make our little victories or successes really possible. We have, I think Ken mentioned, this is organizations or agencies that are supposed to be implementing the law and regulating and protecting our air and our water. This is our 9 to 5, but this is our lives, right? And so we don't just clock out, we live it every day. And so and to us, it's very important to to remember those things that happen and to be able to tell the young people that are coming, we're not handing the baton to the young folks, we're holding it together. Like we're going hand in hand. Our Climate Justice Coalition is all based from youth. And here we are teaching them the same stories that John Mataca taught us about 20, 30 years ago, right? Because we want to make sure that they don't forget, and that when somebody tries to tell them that waste to energy is okay, that they will remember that that is not true. When they say, oh, we're going to take our toxic site to Kettleman City, that they say, nope, we can't do that. That's not going to be allowed, right? And going back to where we started, and this is my last little story with police accountability, we remember all the people that were killed. We remember Sammy Galvan. We remember the 11-year-old who was killed by SWAT, who came into their home and by mistake shot, this little kid. Remember Oscar Grant, we continue to remember all of these names, and there's just too many of them. But when in 2019, when Trevor Seaver was killed, we had to bring that historical memory back to remind the family that this isn't the first time, right? And that we've been asking for these pieces of accountability for a long time beyond VIP. And so we brought a lot of the history with folks, and we created spaces to educate them about what we remember and what we don't want to forget. And so we joined, we actually also brought our spaces that we created to tell these stories of memory, we allowed people to bring to the city council meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. Meetings were held up until midnight, where we had to wait to be able to share our testimony about police violence and the history that we remembered. Through many months, and after a year, the city finally said, okay, let's build we're going to build a committee to look at what are the possibilities for police accountability. And a year later, after that, after they built that committee, they are now looking at passing local policy to have a civilian review board and an independent auditor. While the police again killed another young man in July of this year. And so here we are again telling the same stories for that family so that they also can help remember and continue to fight why we are fighting for what we're doing here in the Central Valley. And like I said, our stories are not unique. They might just look a little bit different, but people power and memory, the collective memory that we have and the support and solidarity with one another is the only thing that has proven to be like the recipe for success. And so thank you for letting me share those little snippets of what I thought were successful moments for us. And there are many more, of course, and thanks to Cynthia that I was able to, sit back and think, well, what is successful stories to me, right? Like, what does success mean? And it was said earlier, it's hard, but there are some, if we look deep enough, and, we can find success through other people's stories because they're going to inform our collective memory and bring solidarity. So
Thank you, Bianca. Appreciate it for sharing that. Cynthia, how would you like to do this? We promised people another break. We are quite a bit behind at this point. Would you like to do a short break and then have Caroline wrap us up and do some Q&A?
Yeah, let's do just like a 5-minute one, and then we'll be caught up.
Sounds good.
That would be great. Thanks,
We'll
Joy.
come back at 12:25, and Caroline, we'll hear from you at that time, if that's okay. So 5 minutes to take care of whatever you need to take care of, but don't go away because Caroline's going to wrap us up in terms of some of the insights that she's had and her environmental justice work over the years, and then we're going to do some Q&A before we call it a day. So 5 minutes, folks. Thank you. Okay, I think that's been 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. You're doing a great job of this. Okay, so now our last speaker is Caroline. How do I pronounce the last name again, Caroline?
Arija.
Arija, okay. Caroline Arija, who has been working in a lot of communities in the Los Angeles area on environmental justice for a long time. She's going to talk about this subject here of burnout among community organizers. So please take it over.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this now afternoon. I'm going to talk about a little bit of what I witnessed and being a part of organizations, still being with organizations, and like how to better navigate this, because it is hard, long work. Next slide, please. So before joining or starting, I think, you have to check with yourself, like what is your strength, what is your commitment, and what are you looking to get out of it? So like think long term, how much time can you spend on this issue? Is this something in your community? Like, are you going to be living there long term? Or are you going to be looking to move? Or is this something with your kid's school or a school that you're affiliated with? Just kind of think about what you can bring to the table. And then also make a list of your goals or interests. And this will help you, this will help it not feel so much like work. If it's something that you're just interested in, that you want to learn more about, you have some free time, this is going to really help have a better experience with this cause or issue that you're with. And then also look at what kind of organization are you going to be doing? Are you going to be creating your own organization where that's going to be, it's going to be yourself doing a lot of the legwork at the beginning? Are you joining an existing organization? What's this existing organization structure? Who runs it? How successful have they been? And what can you bring to that organization? And then also, organizing is not free. It takes money, sometimes not a whole lot of money, sometimes a little bit of money, because you're going to be possibly printing materials, picking up other members, taking them to meetings. So that's gas or even bus to go to community meetings. If you go to like City Hall, your local City Hall, they might charge for parking. So just kind of have a little bit of a budget to know, like, okay, this is my commitment, this is my time, this is how much money I have to put towards this. And also take a good inventory of your skill set. What do you bring to the table? A lot of these times in every organization, we've always needed someone who can put out any kind of graphic design, people that can put out, who are great with social media, people who are great with door knocking, canvassing. So just look into your skill set. What can you bring to the table, and how that will help this organization's mission, help your cause, and then you're also, it's not going to feel like so much work for you. Next slide, please. And then when you're in an organization, one thing you have to always do is, how are you getting your message out? How are you building your network? You want to define and create your role in building this network. Are you going to talk to one neighbor a week, one neighbor a month, one neighbor a year? Are you going to try and grow the network? And how are you going to find people that have your common shares? There might common interests. You might have people who have their own organization, their communities, and then you can go learn from what they're doing in that organization and bring it back to yours. And then also this will help grow your network too. And then when you have an action and you need to go down to City Hall or letter write or anything, you have a good group of people that are there to help support you. And then I think a lot of times, a lot of organizations, they don't utilize social media. They don't utilize hashtags. Some are great with it, but some of the small organizations, you look at their social media, if it's even existent, they haven't posted anything in 3 months or 6 months. So it's just that is something that will help build your network, help get your name out, your cause out, and also it's free. And then also have some milestones, have some goals. Like, is your goal to like grow your social media network? Is it to grow your own internal network? Is it to work with other communities? Is it to find other communities that are dealing with similar problems? You know, so just have some goals, milestones that can help have some organization within these causes. I've been with groups before where people are just constantly contacting us for help with lead, with water issues, with this, with that, and it's just like kind of, you know, we can't be everywhere, but you know, if we had a bigger network, we could help dispatch people to help, you know, walk somebody through similar to like what a social worker would do through their issue, who to contact, and one person to stay assigned with them. And then also have your co-collaborators. I spoke about that, about just having common issues, working with other groups that have had the same issue as you, same cause, and how to move your goal forward. Next slide, please. One thing that is getting harder and harder to do is working with elected officials. There's a lot of people who are doing the work on the street, but there is this just growing mistrust of elected officials, which I understand. Like, you know, we talked about like our disappointments and our victories on this, but it's still very important work. It's still very important that to reach out to your elected official and to know all of your elected officials, know who your who's your if you have a neighborhood council, or who's your council member, who is your even your community block captain, because a block captain will have like connections to an elected official. Just knowing all levels of who who oversees your city or your area or your cause will be great. Get to also know their staff. You know, a lot of times they have deputy directors that are, or they have directors that are over something. Let's say if your issue is housing, they'll have someone with housing, or they'll have someone with people experiencing homelessness. A lot of times, a lot of these electeds, they have, some have larger staffs in bigger cities, some have smaller staff, but knowing who you need to talk to, who you need to speak with will be best, especially when, you know, you're volunteering your time with your issue, with your cause, and you want to make sure you're very strategic in using your time. You just don't want to try emailing the council member and then that person never responds, and then you're like, you should have been emailing their director of this instead to get some leeway. And also find out what your elected officials platform is. Every so often, representatives send a newsletter to say what they're working on, what they've done. You know, they highlight their victories. We voted for them or didn't vote for them or whatnot. Like, you know, but either way, they got the job. They're there to find out what is it that they're trying to push, so you can align yourself with them and say like, hey, I see this is this, and this is what me and my organization we're trying to get pushed through, and we could really use your support. Or how can we support you moving this forward? Especially, we live here, we work here, we want to see our community grow. We want people to stay here, not feel like they have to leave. You know, how can we work together on this? Always keep your goal in mind, what you need to do. Like sometimes, you know, with electeds, you're not gonna, you know, it's rare that you align with 100% of what they're saying or what they're doing. But if you focus on your goal and you focus on what you need to get done, what's the most pressing issue, you'll be able to better use your time. It's, you know, it's still gonna be work. It's still gonna be a long time, you know, but it's something to consider. And also, maybe you may want to run for office. There are so many times that so many seats go uncontested. There's some seats that are even vacant in some areas. Maybe that's your time, your calling to possibly run for office. When I was living in Glendale, we had the Glendale Environmental Coalition. It was started by one man named Dan Brothman, and that man, you know, got us all together. We were trying to stop a gas-fired plant it's been dormant. They wanted to reopen it. Dan ended up running for city council, and now he's a mayor of Glendale. So, you know, now you have an advocate there in the city that can be able to help you push your goals forward. Next slide, please. And then there's always a money issue. I spoke about it earlier about having your own individual budget for like for pushing these causes. But like what is it that you need to get done and how much is it going to cost? So, you could create a budget. I'm saying create a budget of like, what if your issue is building a park? And I'm saying create a budget. There's information out there. There's a lot of public information. Try and find something that is aligned similar to, I'm going to use park as an example. Find a community that has built a park recently that used public funds, because all that money is public information. And you can find out how much it costs to build that park and, what funding sources did they use. And also look at every time, we have an election coming up in November. I'm sure there's going to be some propositions. These propositions promise a lot of money to the communities. Find out how you can tap into them. Sometimes even working to push those propositions, you can help design them down the road. For an example, Measure W, that was a county proposition that I helped collaborate with. And then my part was like getting a lot of people in South Central LA to, make sure that their needs are heard. Let them know that this is a potential, a lot of money for infrastructure, for stormwater capture in our communities. We really need to be a part of this, because when it rains, especially for those of us that take public transportation, it's not that convenient. It's very messy. So that was an example. Now that proposition passed, that's a safe, clean drinking water. Now through property taxes, there's money to capture storm water. And there's an allocation for every part of the county. That was a county initiative. And also, of course, there's legislation, both state and federal. There's always a lot of money on the table for a lot of issues. Like right now, we see with the Biden-Harris administration, they just passed a massive infrastructure bill. There's a lot of that for like, improving drinking water systems. You want to make sure that your elected official knows about that, which I'm sure they do, and how you can help them advocate to make sure your area they're allowed to share. And also what projects in mind that you want to help push, especially when there's this kind of money, because the money will go fast. And even before it's even like been decided, like people have already divvied it out even before it's passed. Next slide, please. And lastly, sometimes when the movement, the cause it's grown so big, you want to reassess if you still need to have a role in it, or maybe it's grown and it's outgrown, what you bring to the table. So knowing when to walk away, because a lot of times in some groups you see like, this person has been at the head for so many decades and they're kind of stagnant. When is it time to walk away and bring some new energy to the table? That's why I said you set a goal in the beginning, and once your goal has been met, then it's like, okay, you can either set a new goal, or that's a great time to exit and, maybe find something different to do. It's not quitting. It's just a time to regroup, to see like things change. People have families, people move, people grow, like work needs change, everything changes. So just like have your goals. So once your goal is attained, you'll be like, okay, like this is time for me to transition now. Or, the mission has changed. And also like, it's also sometimes like, depending on what your role, it's probably time to like bring somebody else in to that role who can help further the mission, and maybe you just may need a break. So that's how I say like what to keep in mind when you're doing these causes. So to make sure that you just don't get burned out, and to make sure like the goal is still in mind. You have a goal and you know when to leave. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Caroline. Have we got any questions in? I don't see anything in the chat. Anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question? I certainly have some. I'm kind of interested, or any of our 6 people, if based on their experiences on this, maybe if they could just talk about maybe their most rewarding and most disappointing experiences. I know during my career, I've had a lot of very rewarding experiences, but also had some disappointing ones. I mean, XI Technologies, even though that facility is closed down, and it's good that it has, you know, it's a secondary lead smelter in Vernon that was out of compliance with a lot of rules and regulations, and a lot of agencies and prosecutors got involved, but it's still contaminated. The community is still dealing with the contamination, and it was an incredibly frustrating experience dealing with Exide and everything that's happened there. We've tried to make it a little better, as we were mentioning about, I think Florence mentioned about the public health study that was done in Del Amo. We you know, partnered with other groups to do a health study in that DTSC priority cleanup area, the 1.7 miles surrounding Exide, which I think is a positive development, but still incredibly frustrating. Okay, anyone want to share their most rewarding or their most frustrating experience? Can be anyone in the audience, any of our presenters.
I can go.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Susie. Frustrating experience is that sometimes our local government does not, they're, in my opinion, too worried about the image and not concerned enough about the community that they've been elected to represent. So a lot of the times they don't stand up, they don't you know, protect the community like they should. And I feel that's what happened in Cudahy, at least this last time, with the project that the community had to stand up and fight. Because we do have communication with our local government. But just talking to them wasn't enough. So it's like they just need, if they're going to be elected officials, then they need to stand up and face the issues head on, no matter what the outcome is, and not be too worried about their image, but mostly about the community. That's what they should put first.
Can be really frustrating. Bianca, go ahead.
One of my things that frustrates me as we, hold agencies accountable is the lack of interagency communication. Often there are issues that affect air and water and natural resources, and they don't seem to be communicating with one another. Like it was mentioned earlier in one of the stories, they're just pointing fingers. Oh, that's not me, you need to go talk to that department. Oh no, that's not us, you need to go talk to the other people. And we get the runaround, but I think, through advocacy, we're often, repeating ourselves and playing broken record to remind them, no, CARB already said pesticides is an issue that is an air quality issue. And so when the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District wants to say, oh, we're not going to add pesticides to the SIP because it's not our realm, we have to remind them, no, actually it is. And then another part that kind of is related to that is laws don't catch up to the science. And OEHA just did a new study on Talon, a pesticide, that says that it is found the particulates of this pesticide in the air is found to be 14 times higher than expected. But the Department of Pesticide Regulation isn't changing its practices or the way that they allow, they're still allowing Talon. They have their own criteria, but OEHA did the study. The department hasn't implemented new practices or new laws or regulations.
It takes a while to catch up.
Yeah. And that's just too it's too much.
People
We're dying.
are victims of that. I will tell you though that, and it's not, our greatest achievement, but one of the more rewarding things was when Florence was at DTSC, and I was on the South Coast AQMD governing board, and she told me about an inspection that her inspectors did at a metal foundry site in which someone was dumping nickel dust shavings, very toxic, in open air without respiratory controls, and her inspectors had to run out of the room just to save them. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's an air quality issue. Have you talked to AQMD? She goes, no, I don't know who to, give this to at AQMD. I said, just send me the report. She sent me the report. I passed it on to the staff at AQMD, and they actually rewrote the permit at that facility because of the unsafe practices with the nickel. And that facility eventually did close down because of their other unsafe practices and problems. But Florence's hand is up, so I'll let her go, and then Caroline.
What I want to say is how much I applaud the comments that were made about agencies working together. And I have this reality, which is if a company has serious violations at DTSC, for example, they probably have serious violations with the water, with the air, etc. And that need to share information and work together is just critical. I think it's very important. And, you know, Joe, you mentioned Exide closing down. Recently, I had the opportunity to celebrate the retirement of two absolutely tremendous people at DTSC, a fellow named Paul Baranek and a fellow named Rick Jones. And an attorney with the U.S. Attorney's Office came to comment on the incredible work that was done by Paul and Rick and other enforcement agencies that resulted in Exide closing. And it just really brought home for me how critical it is that people work together. And it's more than just once in a while they work together. It's about, there were three strike forces, enforcement strike forces. One was the County of Los Angeles, one was the federal, and I believe the other one was the city of LA. And those people doing enforcement in various program areas got together enough that they knew each other, that they trusted each other, and they would share information on what they were working on in these meetings. And building that trust and building those supports just is a very important thing.
Yeah, thank you, Florence. Yeah, it can work right when people are working together. Caroline, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, when you were talking about disappointments, one of the biggest disappointments is just that agencies have their limits. It's almost that they're in the business of managing an environmental issue instead of closing it, shutting it down, and relaying that back to someone who's in the community with you, like they're not going to be able to close down this refinery or this factory or this whatever it is. All they're going to be able to do is this, and this, and that, and keeping people engaged, knowing that we're just going to have to keep fighting and working with this agency until we can get a better resolution.
Thank you. Ken, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to echo what Susie said earlier, is the elected officers. Sometimes they represent more about who is paying for their campaign than representing the community people. So, and that is also, community are at a disadvantage because we don't have a lot of money. And so if you have an industry or dominating your community, they can support candidates and they run for city council and whatever. And usually those people, they supported and they got elected into the politics or the city council. Those people actually does not support a community member. So Susie's case, actually, we have to basically find an attorney to overturn some of the decision made by those people we elected. And also, both Susie and Michael mentioned, like, it costs a lot of money to hire those legal service. And again put our community at a disadvantage. So that is something which as like something that, yeah, it's something which bothers me. The other thing which I wanted to say is about lack of community level monitoring, especially after AB 617 passed, because when you think about this, what does community have in monitoring capacity or capability? I don't know what we can come up as a list. And when we are talking about managing air quality, and I don't know how this agency is managing a local air quality when you don't have data. Because of lack of local monitoring capability, what happened right now is the community member will make a report or complain, say, oh, I smell something, or there are heavy dust on my car and things like that. That's basically the end of it. And I think this could be pushed much further. Like I mean, with all the advanced technology, like if an air district or CARB has more advanced equipment, like handheld testing device, I mean, there is no reason why it's like somebody else also mentioned, like we complain something, and because we don't have inspector coming in to us, and then a day or two afterward they coming in and nothing, I mean, they couldn't find anything. So it's total waste of the inspector's time and also community member. Once, I mean, after we did it a few times, people stopped reporting because nothing happened. Okay, so fortunately, I'm on the Bay Area, on the BAQMTD side, we are working with the enforcement division. We're trying to advocate this community engaged enforcement. And also I'm working with CARB, and we're trying to basically combine the strength of the community, which is we are always there. We pay attention, we 24/7, and most of the agency has the money and the resource, and hopefully we can develop something which take advantage of from both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I haven't had a chance. We are gonna wrap up here, but I haven't had a chance to acknowledge some of the names and people I see in the audience. That we've got representation from the whole alphabet soup of environmental agencies from across the state. And if that's the Bruce Jennings, I think it is down there on my screen. We have a former chief consultant, I believe he was, for the Senate Environmental Committee, Senate EQ, Environmental Quality Committee, and who wrote a book called The War on California, all about advocacy and efforts of preventing polluters from dominating the legislature. So if you haven't read Bruce's book, please do. I don't know if he's listening, or else maybe he would have come off of mute and told me it actually is the Bruce Jennings I'm thinking of.
Yes, Joe.
It is. My goodness. Okay. Well, that takes me back a few decades. Hello, Bruce. It is very good to see you.
Great to see all of you.
You can get your book for $9.61 off of Amazon right now. You do tell the stories of some of these successes and frustrations of working in the legislature. It's
right. And if I could just throw in my 2 cents, the part that I appreciate all the frustrations. As a matter of fact, Joe knows in my former life, I'd be taking notes about what to write up for new legislation for January from all that you're saying. But I'm also struck by, and Joe and I know others have this view of, like, as difficult and as frustrating and episodes like Exide are, when you look around at other states, and this goes to the issue of democracy, both what you folks are practicing real time in the trenches on the front lines, but when you look at other states, we've got such a wealth of richness of exactly what all the folks on this conversation are all about, that that is very, very strengthening, very encouraging, because there are many places where people really, I think it goes back to one of the former presentations that was just given the last half hour or so of, when you don't have other sorts of linkages to make with other of your brethren, other people who are sort of marching with you, that can be very dispiriting. So yeah. Great
Well,
work.
I can tell you, and I'm going to take this back, Cynthia, to when this all started. The Los Angeles Environmental, she's in the waiting room. When you readmit her to her own meeting. The Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network was formed back in around, it must have been around the year 2000, 2001. When Angela Johnson Mazzaros had the idea of getting environmental justice advocates together and under non-crisis situations to get to know each other better and to start working together and to hear from maybe a guest speaker. So all I needed to do was and I might not come up with the best ideas, but when I hear a good idea, I think I'm pretty good at recognizing it. And so all I needed to do was go out and find the money to pay for parking and lunch once a month for folks. And we did that, and we brought Los Angeles area environmental justice community members together for many years as the LA EJ network was born out of this process where we just invited everyone. It was first come, first serve. 35 people fit in our conference room, and we had a guest speaker, normally someone from the community talking about what they were doing and all of that. And as that progressed, and as people got to know each other, and as people shared with each other the stories that, like we heard today, how they succeeded and what tools and leverage they used and who they knew at which agency, who they could count on to get things done. And the Bruce Jennings of the world, if you needed legislation, they started, people started showing up early and leaving late and having meetings before our meeting and after our meeting. I keep telling people that Gideon Krakoff and Misty Sanford met and got married. That wouldn't have happened without our EJ network meetings. And it all started way back then. And it's continued to this day with Cynthia's leadership of bringing people together for things like this in the webinar format. So no one be disheartened, and everyone be amazed, because you could look around that room back then and be absolutely stunned by how much, motivated people without any resources and just the capabilities of working hard and in their community's interest were able to accomplish. And you can look around this webinar and see the very same thing. So thank you to all of the participants. And I want to mention that Coalition for Clean Air is with an AB 617 grant from the California Air Resources Board is organizing an all about air quality boot camp series to do some trainings and help people learn some of the tools that get things done when it comes to the world of air quality and just understanding how the different agencies work, which is ridiculously complicated. So I'm going to turn it over to Robina Sualv, who's going to thank our sponsors and wrap us up and get us out of here. But again, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for all of you. We had almost no drop off during this whole 3-hour meeting, which is absolutely crazy. So you guys are very committed. I really appreciate it. And thanks again. And thank you, Cynthia, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Joe. On behalf of the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network, thank you to our generous sponsors, to all of our wonderful attendees, to our extraordinary moderator, Dr. Joe Liu. Thank you to our inspirational and truly outstanding speakers for their stories today, to our translators, our exceptional translators, Marco and Eldo, and thank you, Helena and Taylor from the California Air Resources Board for your phenomenal IT support, Stephanie and Sarah for your help with the chat. And please join us November the 16th. Mark your calendar, time to be determined, for the Cal EPA boards, offices, and departments advancing community protections through improved enforcement workshop. It's going to be exceptional. Please join us there. Thank you so much for being here today, and all the best to all of you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you for the awesome talks. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. I thought this was just exceptional, tremendous. Thank you all for participating.
Thanks, everyone. My computer was keeping me muted. I know there were people who would pay for that button, but I'm unmuted now. And, you know, I just want to say that we try and emulate what we would like to see with agencies. Today, nobody was muted. Nobody was made to sit in a waiting room. We were all heard and everybody managed themselves wonderfully. So, you know, please note to agencies, we don't need to be locked up and shackled when we participate in your meetings. It's a partnership and it should be that way. So thank you for everybody who participated. And like Robina said, we'll see you for our final workshop, you know, coming up next month. So thank you all so very much. Okay, Helena, I think we're done today. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm gonna end it for everyone. Thank you, everyone. Bye.